the RESTful service assignment. So let's talk about creating RESTful web services. So up to this point, we've been modifying several different types of data types. We've created, we've been creating, reading, updating courses, modules, lessons, and whatnot. And we've been, modifying different lists of these different objects, right? We first started with manipulating a list of courses. Then we were manipulating a list of modules, and we've been doing that using several endpoints that I've provided for you. Right? So we want to be able to see, well, how do we do that? We want to create our own endpoints. So for this assignment, we're going to be creating, reading, updating, deleting a list of widgets, right? And widgets are going to be graphical representations of different types of content. A widget might be a YouTube video. A widget might be a paragraph, a list. It could be a slides, any media, right? Any content that you might want to add as part of content. Okay. So we're going to be looking at just two very simple types of widgets. Being able to add just a heading widget, right? So you could maybe add a different sections to your document, and a paragraph. So headings and paragraph, headings and paragraph. So that's most of our content. Later on in a couple other weeks, we'll add other more interesting types of widgets. But for now, we'll add those two simple ones. And we're going to store this list of widgets in a remote server, which you are going to implement. Right? And for now, it'll just be an array. Right? It'll be a remote array living on some server, and we're going to expose the create, remove, update, delete endpoints so that you can manipulate this remote array of widgets. And then your client is going to use your server, right, to then render this list of widgets for a particular topic. Make sense? All right, so let's take a look at the assignment. You'll need a Java Spring Boot server. If you don't have one already, you can create one like this, but you should be able to just reuse the current Java server that we used a couple of weeks ago. I think we used it for the JavaScript and the jQuery assignment, the HTML and whatnot. You can use that same server, right? That server had content in the index file, and it had a bunch of other content, which we're not going to touch, right? We're not going to use. We're not going to use any of that content for now, right? Instead, we're going to use that server as a container of our web service, right? We're going to use it mostly for data access. Right? We're going to send data. We're going to retrieve data as JSON objects back and forth, right? And storing it in the memory of the server. The week after that, next week, what we'll do is that we'll take that data, instead of storing it in a local array, we'll store it permanently in a relational database, right? In MySQL relational database. Yes. But for now, we're going to CRUD all this inside of an array. Okay, so you'll create your own. So for 50 points, create a widget RESTful service. So RESTful service. So RESTful service. What RESTful services are a set of conventions, right, on how we might expose a data model that might be stored either in memory or stored in a file or stored in a database. How would we expose that data model, right, and actions that would allow you to manipulate that data model to the rest of the world through an HTTP API, okay? And the conventions state that these URLs that you're going to use to interact with this data model follows a specific syntax. Right? So for instance, if you're manipulating courses or lessons or modules or widgets, then your URL should contain the name, a noun that describes what it is that you're manipulating. Right? So in our case, since we're manipulating widgets, your URL should end in /widgets. Okay. The other conventions state that if you're creating content, right, then you would use a post, and you would include the new data in the body of the HTTP request. If you are doing a read-only operation, then you would use a get instead, an HTTP get, right? If you are manipulating and updating a record that already exists in memory or in a database, then you would use a put, right? And also include the ID of the primary key that uniquely identifies that record as the last element of that URL. So it would be slash widgets slash and then the primary key of whatever you are manipulating. If you're deleting something, you would use an HTTP delete, and same thing slash widgets and then slash the ID of whatever you're removing. Right? So these are just conventions, right, that have taken hold on in industry, and somewhat of a best practice of how is it that we interact with these models, right, that live this data set that lives in a remote server. So we're going to follow that convention, right, and we're going to write this, right? We're going to write a client that is going to be written using React components, Redux, to maintain local state in a front end, right? Which is the same application you've been working for the last couple of weeks, right? We're going to extend that to have a list of widgets, and instead of communicating with a remote server that I provide, it will be communicating with a Java server that you're going to build, right? It's the same Java server that we used a couple of weeks ago, right? But we're going to extend it to expose a REST controller, right? That's going to be responsible for interacting using the HTTP protocol, right? So you're going to write your own controller, which is going to expose these URLs, right? And they're going to be triggered when you send a post, a put, a delete, a get, right? That's a responsibility to be listening for these HTTP events, right? They're going to convert these verbs of posting, of putting, and deleting. They're going to convert that into by using a Java service that right now the only thing that Java service is going to do is just going to maintain the life cycle of an array of objects, right? So it's going to have methods such as create widget, delete widget, find widget, right? And the only thing it's going to do is it's going to manipulate an array of widgets. Next week we'll extend that idea into storing it in an actual database, right? We'll extend that service, so it'll be a little more interesting. But for now, that service is just going to manipulate the data in an array. All right, so we'll first start with creating a data model where we're going to keep track of the data that describes all widgets in a Java class called widget.java in a directory called models. So all our models would live under the models directory. So if we would be doing this for the entire application, we would also have here course.java, module.java, lesson.java. All our models would live here, right? User, person, faculty, students, all the models would live under this directory, right? And your Java classes would have all the fields and data types of what makes a widget, a person, course, right? That describes each one of those data models. We'll then implement a widget service.java, which is, again, it's going to the responsibility is to manipulate the data model, right? And to add a widget, remove a widget, update a widget, right? Find all the widgets that are available, right? Which right now they're going to be just stored in a local array. Right? Next week it'll use MySQL to interact with the relational database, right? But for now, it'll expose we'll provide an API, right? That will allow you to create widgets, find widgets, update widgets, delete widgets on the server, right? On the Java server. And notice for create widgets and find widgets for topic, it'll need to know who the parent topic is, right? Now remember, your topics live where? Live in my generic server, right? Which my generic server is providing these IDs. Okay, you're gonna have to feed these IDs whenever you want to create a widget, right? To your brand new server, and your server for now it'll keep track of kind of like a map, right? Where we'll say, okay, well, these are all the widgets for topic 1, and these are all the widgets for topic 2. So you're not going to maintain one array. Actually, you're going to maintain many arrays, right? Mapped inside, through a map. And you're going to use the topic ID as a key into which array you're going to update. Yes, right. So that if you're searching for the widgets for topic 1, then you use a topic ID to fetch the widgets for topic 1 and whatnot. So you have find widgets for topic, update a widget, delete a widget, and right. So that's the service. Then you have the controller. The controller is going to have almost the same exact methods, right? But it's not going to manipulate the data model at all, right? It'll use the service to manipulate the data model. The responsibility of the controller is to expose the data model, right? Expose the service through a URL, a RESTful URL. right? So that you can then now hit these URLs and invoke all this behavior, right? That's its only responsibility. It should not know where the data lives. It manipulates the data only through the service. Only the service knows how to manipulate this data, right? It's only the service knows that it's just a map, right? It'll be, and it's only the service that will know next week that it's a it's a relational database, right? Nobody else knows this, but the controller doesn't know it, right? And nobody should either. Only the service is aware of the idiosyncrasies of how the data model is stored and manipulated and how to and whatnot. Yet it exposes a nice API that to the rest of the world, to the rest of the application. Make sense, right? So the controller exposes the data model, but through a URL, right? And that's its only responsibility. Right? It doesn't know how to manipulate the model. It delegates that to the service. Right? And the service is agnostic also. The service, notice, it will be agnostic of how is the data model being manipulated, through which channel or through which media. Is it, if it's through a RESTful API, or maybe it's a local business rules or logic that is running on the server, right? The service just manipulates the model. It doesn't really care that it's being exposed through HTTP, okay? So each one has its own very well-defined role. So once you have that, so that's the server side. That's on the server side. On the client side, we'll need to start using your brand new Java server RESTful API. Okay. So you'll write a widget service, which will look very, very similar to the services that you already built up to this point. You can probably just copy and paste your topic service or your lesson service and just change the signatures, right? And then and you'll be good to go, right? It'll use a create widget, find widgets for topics, same functions. I like to use the same functions on the client, on the controller, and on the service, so I can keep it straight in my head, right? That it's the same function all across, right? Once I call it from the client, which connects to the server, which connects to the service. So these are the same, right? These are exported constant functions that can be used from the rest of the client. Only 5 points because you should know how to do this with your eyes closed, right? You've done this quite a bit already. Perhaps you can think of a generic way of doing this, right? Where you write just one service, right? You can configure it so that it behaves correctly for any data type. All right, so then once you have that service, you'll create a component that can display a list of widgets, right? So WidgetList component, you decide whether it's a container or a component, whatnot. It'll accept a list of widgets as an array, a parameter, and it'll just iterate and render a whole bunch of widgets. Yes, notice that all our application has been just lists. We're just been manipulating lots of lists. A list of courses, list of modules, list of lessons. Now here we're manipulating a list of widgets. We're going to be able to add widgets, remove widgets, update these widgets. So for 10 points, a widget list component, which is going to iterate over an array of widgets. Yes. Okay. For now, we're going to implement 2 types of widgets, the paragraph widget and the heading widget. Here's an example of what the widget list will look like eventually. It has, here's one widget. Here's a second widget. Okay. And because I'm a faculty, I will be able to see the widgets in their editing format, right? In their editing view, it gives me a whole bunch of forms that allow me to edit the widget. Okay. So for instance, if I'm editing the heading widget, it allows me to type the text for the heading. It allows me to select the size of the heading, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 heading size. It also, all widgets have a generic widget name that I can give it some whatever generic name that I want. It doesn't really do any logic. Also, notice that each widget has a drop down that allows me to on the fly change the type of the widget, whether I want a paragraph widget or heading widget, a YouTube video widget, right? And as I change the URL, it flips and shows me the right version of the widget, right? Also has an X so I can remove the widget. And it also has an up down that allows me to reorder the widget, right, up and down. Okay, so each widget has like an order parameter, right, attribute, so that it knows where relative to all the sibling widgets does it fall, so I can sort the widget. Also, notice that the list widget which we're not implementing for this assignment. We're not implementing the list widget. We'll do that next week. The list widget has a different form, right? It allows me to type in all the elements or the items of a widget, right? And it also lets me configure whether I want a numeric widget or bullets widget, all right? But we won't do the list widget this week. We'll do that next week. This week we'll do paragraph. We'll see in a minute. Also, each widget has a preview of what the widget would look like, you know, if this were a student, right? A student would see, it wouldn't see all the form stuff, right? None of the buttons would only just see with a preview, right? So it shows, notice for the heading, it shows me the heading preview, and for the list, it shows me a list of the preview of the heading of the list. I can also click on preview button. If I click on the preview button, all the forms disappear, right? All the forms disappear. I'm only left with the preview. I'm only left with this. Not even the label preview, right? Only with what the content of what the student would see. Yes, right. I can see that preview, and that's all for all the widgets. For all the widgets, I have also a plus at the bottom where I can add a new widget at the bottom, right? And I can just keep adding more and more widgets at the bottom. Okay. So here's an example of when I flip the preview. When I flip the preview, notice that everything disappears. I'm just left with the actual content. See that? Right. This is what a student would see. Right. So a faculty can preview what the student might see. Also notice that it has a save button there. See that? So that save button is a bulk save. Right. Now it depends how you implement this. I always get this question: is the save button necessary? It's not necessary. It depends how you implement it. Right? If you are caching all your updates in your Redux, yes, if you're caching everything in your Redux, you could, when you click on save, take all those changes, right, and then just bulk send this to the server for saving, right? Or what you might prefer to do is, as you are updating the widget, or as you're updating the widget, maybe each widget can have some students prefer to have like a save button on each widget, right? And you can save each widget individually, so that you can click on the save button of the widget, and then you put all the content for that one widget, and you update that one widget at a time, right? When you're done with that particular widget, see that, right? If you prefer to do that, then you don't need the save button, right? You don't need to do a bulk save, because each widget is being saved individual when you're done. Yes, I'll leave that up to you, which way you want to implement that. Right? If you went with the route of that you're saving each widget independently, then you don't need the save button. If instead you're going to do the save bulk, then you do need the save button. I'll leave that up to you. Okay. Let's see. All right. So here's a paragraph widget. The paragraph widget is just it's just a text area where we can type the content of the paragraph, and the name of the widget. Right, and it shows the paragraph content down below, right? Whereas the heading widget, it shows the text, the size, and the name, right? And it shows the preview down below. You'll need a reducer, right, on the client side, and these are some of the actions that I think you will need. Create a widget, delete a widget, update a widget, find all widgets for topic, right? If you need other other actions, feel free to add your own actions in there, right? Again, this depends also how you're gonna actually implement the saving of the widgets. Finally, conventions, some naming conventions, components, containers. That's the same from last time. Also, controllers. All controllers should end with a controller or service, right, and be in a particular folder, right? And all URLs, right, and the endpoints for the post, get, delete, and whatnot. Okay. So for this assignment, you're going to have to submit 2 servers, 2 Heroku servers, right, and 2 GitHubs, right? One will host your Java server, and one will host your Node.js React application. Yes, and they're going to be talking to one another. They're going to be talking to one another, right? So So we'll need 4 links from you. We'll need 2 links for the Heroku servers where these are running, and we'll need the 2 GitHub repositories of where these things have been submitted. Okay. All right. Any questions?